Diva harja agus flauta arashko, Irish with Rosie. Smisha dosta, Rosie, duh. I'm very excited that you've decided to join me today. I'm particularly glad that we'll be diving into something I think you'll find interesting. Now, once I tell y'all the subject of this video, I'll be showing you what an easy topic it is to master. Now, I don't know if y'all have studied this topic yet, so I hope that you're ready to tackle this with me. So in case y'all didn't notice, I've been talking kind of weird, but it was for a good reason, because that intro was filled with examples of today's topic, complement clauses. So now that you know what's going on, I'll just bet that you're itching to learn more. So today's topic, complement clauses. Guh, gur, gurbh, gurbh. And we'll talk about what those words are and what they do in a few minutes. As I go on, as usual, you'll see notes like this one on the other side of the screen, and you can follow along. So today, it's time to learn about Irish complement clauses. Let's look at the first purple box on this page. First, what is a clause? A clause is a group of words that contains a subject and a verb. Some clauses, called independent clauses, can stand alone as a complete sentence, while others, dependent or subordinate clauses, cannot stand alone, and they function as helpers to the main clause in a larger sentence. One type of dependent clause is called a complement clause, which is what we're talking about today. Its job is to complete the thought of a sentence. Now, next page. These complement clauses will complete sentences like the following. He said that. She heard that. I hope that. It seems that. I know that. I think that. I don't know if. I'm not sure whether. I wonder what. I saw who. I know why. Let's read the purple box below that list. In English, complement clauses are introduced with certain words, such as that, if, how, whether, who, where, which, what, or why, as seen in the above examples. Irish also has certain words called particles to introduce complement clauses. We'll look at those words as we go and find out how to use them. Next box down. Today, let's just look at complement clauses which in English would start with the word that, or sometimes if or whether. Many of these clauses contain real verbs, while others contain a special verb-like word called the copula. But let's look at the that clauses which contain real verbs first. So far so easy, right? So that clauses with real verbs. The special words, called particles, that are used to introduce that clauses in the present, future, and conditional tenses are guh, used with positive statements, nah, used with negative statements, or used with clauses of uncertainty. In a few minutes, it'll be clear what positive statements, negative statements, and clauses of uncertainty are. So let's keep going. Note in the yellow box, these particles will cause eclipsis or uru in a subsequent verb beginning with a consonant when possible, and it will prefix in dash to a vowel. If you don't know what eclipsis is, I will link my video on it down below, but it's basically that certain consonants have corresponding consonants that you place before them in certain situations, and they take over or eclipse the sound of the word. But you can watch my video to know more. So let's look at the first example. Shivam kachamanima kachiantre. I think that I'll drive to the beach. This is a positive statement. It's a positive statement because we're saying something we're gonna do, not something we're not gonna do. I think is the main clause, but that I'll drive to the beach completes the thought, and it is the complement clause. Let's look at another example. Is kasul nahul akrasarav? It seems that y'all aren't hungry. This is a negative statement because we're saying what isn't. It seems that y'all aren't hungry. Or literally, it seems that there isn't hunger on y'all. And the last example is an example of a clause of uncertainty. Now, clause of uncertainty I don't think is like an official term, but that's just a term I made up for it because that's what makes the most sense to me. Neil Makincha and Dorachia car at Isartu. I'm not sure if she'd lend me her car. She'd be smart not to, I can't drive. So again, this sentence has a clause of uncertainty. Something that is possible to happen, but nobody really knows. I'm not sure if. I'll explain that more in the yellow box below. So note, in the last example, the particle un was used as an equivalent of if. Unlike the above example, un is usually used to introduce a question. For example, will she in a seagull? Is she up yet? But as we saw, un can also be used to introduce complement clauses of uncertainty that in English would usually be introduced by the words if or whether. For example, Nilasugam and will she in a seagull? I don't know if she's up yet. Even though this literally says, I don't know, is she up yet? A question mark is not placed at the end, and it's not said like a question either, because the sentence is meant as a statement, not a question. Now, moving on, the purple box below. Let's take a look at the particles used to introduce past tense that clauses with real verbs. The corresponding particles that introduce that clauses in the past tense are gurbh, nar, and ar, which cause lenition when possible, or shevu. Lenition or shevu, again, if you don't know about that, I will link my videos about lenition down below, but it's just placing an H after the initial consonant of a word. When possible, not all consonants are lenitable, and that changes or softens the initial sound of the consonant in certain situations. But again, you can watch my video on lenition to learn more. Moving on. Examples. So the first example, Bechet Garagshe. Maybe he left, or it may be that he left. That he left is a positive statement in the past tense. Now, technically it's kind of uncertain because we're saying maybe, but this doesn't count as a clause of uncertainty. The next example, Andoigat Narle Ifa and Mamram. Do you suppose Ifa didn't read the memo? This is a negative clause because it's a clause about not doing something, and it's in the past tense, so nar is used. And the very last example will contain a clause of uncertainty in the past tense. Nilasugam Ashrithna Sha Avela Nunarhrithni. I don't know whether he finished his meal or not. I don't know is the main clause, and whether he finished his meal or not is the complement clause of uncertainty in the past tense. Next page. Alright, next note in yellow. Past tense verbs beginning with a vowel or FH, which is silent, drop their past tense marker D apostrophe after gur, nar, and ar. You may already know, or you might remember from my video on past tense verbs, that past tense verbs beginning in a vowel or FH will have a D apostrophe prefixed to them, and it's like a marker telling you it's past tense. So, for example, Ji Shalon Hanahain, he ate lunch already. But if you were to make that into a complement clause, the D apostrophe would be dropped. For example, Durulum gur Ishelon Hanahain, I was told that he ate lunch already. The D apostrophe was dropped from G to just E because it's part of a complement clause. Also note below that gur, nar, and ar don't lenite the past autonomous, which is the same as the passive voice of 1, regular verbs, or 2, of the irregular verb toi, to give. So let's look at some examples of that. Lema gergilu ticket raffle. I read that raffle tickets were sold. I read is the main clause. That raffle tickets were sold is the complement clause. There's not a true subject here. Rather, it's just stating that tickets were sold by somebody. Who knows who? It's not stated. And since it's in the past passive or past autonomous, gilu will not be lenited even though it's after gur. And the other example is Hualama gertugu scholartihe. I heard that a scholarship was given to her. I heard is the main clause. That a scholarship was given to her is the complement clause. And we have tugu, which is the past passive of the irregular verb toy. So it will not be lenited, even though it's after gur. Hey man, this is going well. Now, there is an exception to the usual particles for past tense complement clauses. 6 of the irregular Irish verbs, of which there are 11, take g, na, and un plus eclipsis in their past tenses, instead of the usual gur, nar, ar plus lenition that you would expect for the past tense. They are the following. The verb be, which means to be, in the past tense of a complement clause will be garo, such as garoshe, that he was. Even though the verb is the verb of a complement clause in the past tense, it still will take g. Abri, which means to say, is gunurch, such as gunurche, that he said. Che, to go, will be gunyahi, gunyahishe, that he went. Jan, to do or make, gunyarna, gunyarnashe, that he did. Fue, to get, will be gawoy, as in gaworshe, that he got. Fek, to see, gawaka, gawakashe, that he saw. So as far as I know, that's literally all there is to know about complement clauses beginning with that, whether, or if when there is a real verb involved. Now let's talk about those same kind of clauses when there is a verb-like word called the copula. That clauses with the copula. Complement clauses introduced by that, whether, or if can sometimes contain a special verb-like word instead of a true verb. It's called the copula. The copula is is in the present tense or ba in the past or conditional. It is a verb-ish linking word. It's like the word is in English, but it's usually only used to equate two nouns with each other, rather than linking a noun with a description, in which case a form of the verb be is used. Let's look at examples. Estalte a Ronan. Ronan is a student. A noun equals a noun. Ronan, student. We're equating two nouns together, so the copula is used. Whereas, ta Ronan klistja. Ronan is smart. We're simply saying a noun, Ronan, is a certain descriptor, smart. So the copula is not used, and a form of be is used. Ta, the present tense. Let's read the purple box below. Sometimes the copula is also used as a tool to rearrange a sentence in a way that brings a certain element of the sentence to the front for emphasis. So for example, you have the sentence, Vishi aglortlam, she was talking to me. Or you could rearrange it to emphasize a certain part of that sentence, such as, Is lumsa avishi aglorch. It's to me that she was talking. It's saying the same thing, but the copula was used as a tool to bring an element of the sentence to the front so that we're saying it's to me she was talking. Anyway, that's just a very brief overview of what the copula is and does. I did do a video on the copula, which I want to redo at some point because I think I could have been more thorough. But anyway, I'll link that below if you'd like to know more. But moving on. When introducing a that clause containing the copula, a special set of introductory particles are used. The copula is not seen in these clauses, but rather it's understood to be contained within the introductory particle. Gur/gurbh, nach, and un are the particles used to introduce copular complement clauses in the present tense. There's not really a future form of the copula. So in each of those particles, gurbh, nach, it's understood that the copula is contained within them. So the copula isn't written out separate in sentences with these particles. You just understand that that is sort of a form of the copula. But we'll see more in a minute. Gur is used before words beginning with a consonant. For example, Tamakensha Garbilan Alane. I'm sure that it's a lovely restaurant. Bielen, restaurant, begins with the B, so we use gur. Gur is also used before vowels, but only in the following cases. We'll see in a few minutes that before some vowels, the copular complement particle gurbh will be used. But this is a list of when you'll use gur before vowels. 1. Before nouns. For example, Durulam gur irishton skaihi. I was told that it's an excellent magazine. The word for magazine, irish, is a noun and it begins with a vowel. So we'll use the particle gur. 2. We'll use gur before prepositions beginning in a vowel. Huelama gur Ard Mhacha a rugadh. I heard that she was born in Ard Mhacha. In begins with a vowel and it's a preposition, so gur was used before it. 3. Before prepositional pronouns beginning with a vowel. Tamakensha gur ugamatan kyart. I'm sure that I am right. Ugam is a prepositional pronoun beginning with a vowel, so gur is used in front. 4. Before adverbs that aren't derived from adjectives, with the exception of the adverb auli, which means so. So what is meant by an adverb derived from an adjective? Let's talk about that in the English language first so it makes more sense. So like the word easy is an adjective. Easily is an adverb derived from the adjective easy. The same thing can happen in Irish. In Irish, éasca means easy. Gahéasca is an adverb that means easily. So that would be an example of an adverb derived from an adjective. So as long as an adverb besides auli in a complement clause that comes right after the copular complement particle is not derived from an adjective, then you'll use gur and not gurbh, as we'll see in some examples later. So for example, Tasulagam guranu ayanitue. I hope that you will do it today. Anu, today, can be a noun, but it's an adverb here, beginning with a vowel. And it's an adverb that is not derived from an adjective in any way. So gur is used beforehand. And number 5, before the pronouns a or eshen, e or isha, id or iadson, if the pronoun is the subject or object of a verbal noun. For example, Shilam gur ia anartan shaw is kyart. I think it's right for her to stay here. Fanart is a verbal noun. I won't go too detailed into what a verbal noun is, but a verbal noun basically is not a true verb, but it functions as a verb in some ways, but technically it's a noun. In English, we have verbal nouns too. They're gerunds and infinitives. I think there's one other kind, but I can't remember right now. But anyway, just know that in these examples, verbal nouns are used. So, fanart is a verbal noun. E, which means she, is the subject here of the verbal noun. She is staying. So, gur is used. And the other example is masan she gur ea hahenchis fire. She figures that it's better to avoid it. A, which means it, him or it, but it means it in this case. Shahench means avoid, and it's a verbal noun. A, the pronoun that comes after the copular complement particle gur, begins in a vowel, it is a vowel, obviously, and it is the object of that verbal noun. So again, gur, not gurbh, is used. Masanchi gur a hahench is fair. Now let's get into the times you'll use gurbh before vowels. So gurbh is used before vowels in the following cases. Now again, remember, everything we're talking about here is present tense. We'll talk about past tense and conditional tense in a couple minutes. So anyway, gurbh is used before vowels in the following cases. Before adjectives, number 1, ta'agla aram gurbh konturation. I fear that that is a bad sign. Og begins with a vowel, but it's an adjective meaning bad, so we'll use gurbh, not gur, beforehand. 2. Before adverbs derived from adjectives, which we talked about before, and the adverb auli. So for example, Lema gurabanu ayantaration. I read that that is rarely done. Anu, meaning rarely, comes from the adjective anu, which means rare. So it's derived from an adjective. It begins with a vowel, so we'll use gurbh and not gur. The next example, Ta sagam gurbh. I know that that is so. It's that one special word, auli. Even though it doesn't come from an adjective, we'll still use gurbh. 3. Before the personal pronouns a, eshin, I, isha, id, idzin, and a, if they are not the subject or object of a verbal noun, like we talked about before. The example, Durulehi garabayan banastare. She was told that he is the manager. There's no verbal noun involved in that complement clause, so we'll put gurbh before a. 4. The demonstrative pronouns a, in, and ood. Those are contractions of the demonstrative pronouns sha, which means this, shin, which means that, and shud, which means that over yonder. So for example, Je Baveen Gurabinea Hafigur. Baveen said that that is her new office. In, the contraction of shin, that. Inea Hafigur, that is her new office. So we'll use gurbh before. And 5, gurbh will be used before the following prepositional copula phrases. These are set phrases that are commonly used. So the first one is gurbahwan de x, y, which means that y is affordable / possible for x. That is, that x has the means to y. Now, we'll give y'all an example of this. I don't have it written here, but I'll just tell you. Shilam gurabahwan de fin an bilya aik. I think that Finn has the means to pay the bill. So step up, Finn. Or more literally, I think that it's affordable or possible for Finn the bill to pay. So I'll read y'all the rest of this list of set copular phrases that begin with a vowel where gurbh will be used beforehand, but I won't give specific examples for each of them. Anyway, but if you search for these phrases, specifically the word that comes after gurbh, you'll probably find several examples, or at least one example of each of these on changlan.ie or faklar.ie. Anyway, moving on. Gurbh al le x y. That y is desirable with x. Gurbh ahanta de x y. That y is recognized by x. Gurbh ahnij de x y. That y is acquainted with x. Gurbh agel de x y. That y is a danger for x. Gurbh agel le x y. That y is a fear for x. Gurbh edal le x y. That y is profitable / beneficial for x. Gurbh alin de x y. That y is appropriate for x. Gurbh eigen de x y. That y is necessary for x. That is, that x must y. Gurbh all de x y. That y is known by x. Gurbh de x y. That y is proper for x. And the last circumstance where gurbh will be used as the introductory copular complement particle before a word beginning in a vowel will be the following random words. Avail, which means exaggeration. Ard, which is a contraction of a and rud, which literally means it thing, but it's meant as the thing. Inu, wonder or surprise. Intus, also wonder or surprise. And ula, load or burden. So for example, Durch kian lehi gerber de tashe giri davreha na karawat ur. Kian said to her that the thing he wants for his birthday is a new tie. Now, what about negative copular complement clauses in the present tense and copular complement clauses of uncertainty in the present tense? Well, let's read our purple box. For the negative clauses, we'll use nach and un for clauses of uncertainty. Nach, used for negative clauses, and un, clauses of uncertainty, are used before all words, whether they begin in a consonant or a vowel. So that's good. The first example, Tamakincha nashkrivnare. I'm sure that he's not a writer. So that's a negative clause. We're saying that someone isn't something. And the last example, Nima alientari. I wonder if she's an artist. So it's a clause of uncertainty, where in English it would begin with if or whether. I wonder if un is used. Now, next purple box. Gur/gurv, nar/narav, ar/arav are the particles used to introduce copular complement clauses in the past/conditional tenses. And I promise you, these have way fewer specific rules than the present tense did. So, gur, nar, and ar are used before consonants, except if, and they lenite the consonant when possible. For example, Is kasul gurvan hlischa I danchin. It seems that your aunt was a clever woman. That she was a clever woman. Well, that's a copular complement clause. It's in the past tense. She was a clever woman. The clause begins with the word ban, woman. That word begins with a consonant. So we'll choose gur as the particle, which will lenite ban to van. Is kasul gurvan hlischa I danchin. Next purple box, gurbh, narav, and arav are used before vowels and f, which is lenited. So, for example, Yema gurvanu arenuation. I read that was rarely done. That was rarely done is a copular complement clause in the past tense. Anu begins with a vowel, so we'll choose gurbh. And the last example, Hulama naravar lahi. I heard that he was not a nice man. That he was not a nice man is a copular complement clause in the past tense. And it's a negative clause because we're saying he wasn't a nice man. So we'll choose narav. And we'll lenite the F. Hulama naravar. FH is always silent. Naravar. Exception. Let's read the exception in the yellow box. When betches, which is just a contraction of the words ba and phages, which together means maybe, or bu, which is just ba plus few, which together mean would be worth, when they start the copular complement clause, the particle isn't usually gurbh, as you would expect based on the previous rules we talked about, but rather gum, mb apostrophe. For example, Gumulish unle ahayhulam, that it would be worth it to him to spend the day with me. Gumechish gumechire, that she might be ready. And that's the end of the main content of this video. So there were some details to it, but it wasn't hard once it's all laid out. So I'm hoping that knowing these structures of what the particles are and when to use them and how to use them will help you to be able to be more flexible with your conversations and stuff, because it helped me just even studying up to do this video. I learned more things than I knew before. I do have a couple of extra tips though that might be helpful. Extra tip 1. The following irregular verbs are the only verbs that have special dependent forms used after the complement particle. So these are special forms that will differ from the independent form of the same tense. So the verb to be. The present tense, the independent form is te, but the dependent form is gwil. Past tense, vi, will be guru. Jan, to do or make. The past tense independent form is rin or rinya. The dependent form is ganyarna. Fue, to get. The independent future tense is yoi. The dependent form is gui. The independent conditional tense is you, but the dependent form is guiu. That one's fun to say. And last, che, to go, the past tense, hue, but the dependent form will be ganyahi. And the second and last tip, while the word that can be omitted from complement clauses in English, the complement particle can't be omitted in Irish. So let's look at these two top examples. In English, you could say, I'd bet that she'd agree with me, and that's correct. Or you could say, I'd bet she would agree with me, which is equally correct, even though we dropped the that from the sentence. In Irish, though, you would say, Hurhan gal ganinta shilam, which means I'd bet that she would agree with me. But unlike in English, it would be incorrect in Irish to drop the particle and say, Hurhan gal inta shilam. And that's basically it. At the very end, I do have a list of some common intros to complement clauses, or rather the independent part of sentences that usually lead into those complement clauses that I think you'll find helpful. I'll go down the list with you. Ta sugam, I know. Tamakincha, I'm sure. Sheelam or capam, I think. Tasulagam, I hope. Ta ahasaram, I'm happy. Jarhan or darlam, I'd say. Isdoilam or masam, I reckon. Ta'aglaaram, I fear. Krejim, I believe. Glakamlesh, I assume or I take it. Hualama, I heard. Yema, I read. Durcha, he said. Iskasul or Jalriansha, which means it seems or it would seem. Fector dusa, it seems to me. Isdoha, it's likely. Durulam, I was told. Nihian intase or Nihian inue, it's no wonder. Shants or jediche, it's possible that. Bejit or betchit, maybe. Nima, I wonder. Herhengal, I bet. We did it, we got through another one. Tasulagam Gerwinshiv Salt Asanishanshaw. If you liked the notes from this video and you'd like to keep them for further reference, I'll post them on Facebook, Instagram, and Dropbox, and I'll link that down below. And by the way, I've been going a little bit long between YouTube videos lately, with good reason. I've been trying to really learn in between doing videos so that I'm better equipped to share info with y'all. But I want to work on my consistency, so hopefully you'll be seeing my next video not like 4 months from now. But speaking of which, if you want to be notified when I do post my next video, be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And please give me a thumbs up if you like this video. And I guess I'll see you all next time. Gajishin, Slanderful!